Buck, I think that's over. I think that's done, but
What do you mean?
I think his career is finished.
From the streets to straight-up stardom, Buck's rise didn't start smooth at all. It was rough, unpredictable, and already setting the tone for everything that came later. Growing up in Nashville, Tennessee, young David Brown was dealing with constant change, bouncing from Sea Fright in North Nashville to the J.C. Napier projects in the South, and then over to the South 7 projects. By the time he was just 8 years old, he already knew the whole city like the back of his hand, moving through different neighborhoods and seeing a mix of street situations that ended up shaping his entire style. He was trying to help out at home and get a little money however he could, and he kept it fully legit the whole time. Buck was out there grinding non-stop, pumping gas for tips, cutting lawns, cleaning cars, anything to get a few dollars stacking. But music, that was his escape, his breath of fresh air, the one thing he could control. He was freestyling with his day ones, battling anyone who wanted to step up, and slowly building a buzz in Nashville's underground hip-hop scene. And this is where the story starts getting wild, because it shows Buck's early hunger and real ambition. One day, Buck and his homie found a BG Chopper City CD, and on the back cover, there was a phone number for Cash Money Records. These two young guys, barely knowing what they were doing, actually called that number with a bold idea, hoping somebody on the other end would take them serious. This moment right here is where Buck's hustle really started shining. These two young hustlers actually told Cash Money they wanted to book them for a full show in Nashville for around $5,000. And somehow, against all odds, Cash Money really went through with the booking.
But what did happen was Buck and Lil Jimmy ended up meeting everybody at Cash Money Records. And the first thing that Birdman told Buck was to spit a freestyle for him, and he put him up against Lil Wayne at that time, and they went back and forth. And that ended up impressing Birdman.
The show itself never ended up happening, but what did happen changed Buck's entire life in a way nobody could have predicted. Birdman was so impressed by Buck's confidence and talent that he immediately brought him down to New Orleans to see if he could bring him into the Cash Money family. That moment alone showed Buck he was standing in rooms he never imagined he'd even step into. And at just 14 years old, Buck made one of the biggest choices of his entire life. He dropped out of school to go all in on rap. Whether people agree with a move like that or not, it proves how dedicated he was and how serious this dream was to him. This wasn't a side activity or some random hope. Music was his whole path, his escape route, and the one thing he believed could lift him out of the environment he grew up in.
Buck ended up coming on with them and hopefully having his situation figured out as well. But as years went on, Buck said he spent 3 to 4 years with Cash Money and none of his music ever got released. He got essentially put on the back burner while the other artists on Cash Money like Lil Wayne, Juvenile, BG, so on and so forth, ended up blowing up.
The only real proof Buck has from his Cash Money chapter is a cameo in Big Timer's Big Ballin' music video. By 1999, Buck had reached his limit. He was watching everyone else around him rise while he stayed stuck on the sidelines, and he finally made the tough call to step away from Cash Money and return to Nashville to carve his own lane. But those years weren't wasted at all. He picked up real game about the industry, learned how the business moved, and built major connections. He linked with people like DJ Paul from 3 6 Mafia and Juvenile, relationships that would end up being crucial later. Back in Nashville, Buck reconnected with his local crew and got right back to the grind, pushing independently with even more hunger than before. No label backing, just pure grind. On August 22nd, 2000, Buck dropped Thug Until the End with his homie D-Tay, and something unbelievable happened. This fully independent project actually charted on Billboard, hitting number 34 on the US R&B chart and number 17 on the US independent chart. For an unknown rapper out of Nashville with no machine behind him, this was massive. Buck managed to move around 10,000 units, and even though that might not match major label numbers, for an indie artist selling music out the trunk and doing everything himself, that was a major win. More importantly, it proved he had a real fan base.
And out of my ordeal back in the streets, I ended up getting shot in a home invasion and a robbery. One in the arm and one in the upper thigh area. It was enough for me to wake up and really realize that, yo, if this shit keep going on like this, I'm either to get killed or I'm gonna go to jail. And I really realized that because I was getting down for real. Really started to devote more of my time to the music then, the studio, period.
That people were actually listening to what he was saying and connecting with the story he was telling. But then came the wake-up call that shifted Buck's entire mindset, a moment that forced him to choose what path he wanted to walk for the rest of his life. After recovering from being injured during a home invasion robbery, Buck made a personal promise: no more mixing with anything that could drag him down. From that point forward, he was putting everything into music and leaving the street distractions behind. And right when he needed a break the most, opportunity showed up through one of his old Cash Money connections. DJ Paul from 3-6 Mafia, who had always respected Buck's talent and writing skills, heard what happened and reached out immediately. He had Project Pat go scoop Buck up from Nashville and bring him to Memphis so he could lock in and lay down some tracks. This moment opened a brand new door for Buck, just when it looked like things were hitting a dead end. Out of those Memphis sessions came Buck's first real album placement. The track Memphis on 3-6 Mafia's When the Smoke Clears 66-61 album. This was the kind of moment Buck had been waiting for, the type of exposure that could finally swing some bigger doors open. Even though it was a strong look, Buck still didn't end up signing with 3-6 Mafia, so he went right back to Nashville, grinding independently again, but now with more visibility and more real connections than ever before. Before we jump too far ahead, we gotta break down how Buck actually ended up joining G-Unit, because that story is wild on its own. When things started heating up, Birdman, his old Cash Money connect, reached out again with a brand new idea. A lot had changed since the late 90s when Buck first tried to get things rolling with Cash Money. By this time, Cash Money was on a whole different level. Bigger buildings, luxury cars everywhere, and a full-blown empire in motion. Birdman wanted Buck to join a new group he was putting together called Head Buses. So Buck flew back down to New Orleans hoping this would finally be the move that put everything into place. But the same old problems started showing up again, and it hit Buck hard. After sitting around for about a week with no official paperwork, no solid updates, and no real progress toward the promised deal, he started losing patience. He wasn't that same young teen who could sit around waiting forever. He was now a grown man with real responsibilities back home, things he needed to take care of, and he couldn't just let time slip away while nothing happened. Buck could feel history repeating itself, and he knew he needed something real, not another empty promise. Then something completely unexpected happened. The kind of moment that shifts someone's whole future.
Juvie happened to pull up at the office, and when he pulled up, he was kind of shocked to see me there. I'm like, I've been here for a whole week. And he was like, man, you want to get up out of here for a minute? You know what I'm saying? And I took that ride with Juvie, and that's where my career started with Juvenile.
Juvenile walked into the Cash Money offices and was surprised to see Buck just sitting there waiting around with no real direction. Juvenile himself was going through his own transition, dealing with major disagreements at Cash Money, and he made Buck an offer that would flip everything upside down. Buck officially became part of Juvenile's UTP movement, at least on the surface. But here's the detail that really shows how sharp Buck was, even back then. When Juvenile handed him the contract, Buck took it home, slid it under his bed, and never actually signed it. That was a bold move, and it showed he was thinking ahead instead of rushing into something that might turn messy later. During this time, Buck dropped 2 projects, Born to Be a Thug on October 10th, 2002, and a compilation album with UTP players on October 8th, 2002. But the wild part? He was never officially signed on paper to UTP, not even once. Why move like that? Because Buck was paying attention. He learned from what he saw at Cash Money, and he noticed Juvenile had his own serious problems brewing with the label. Things weren't looking steady, and Buck didn't want to get locked into another situation that could fall apart at any moment. At one point, Juvenile even told Buck himself that if a better opportunity came along, he should take it. That advice ended up changing everything. Buck and Juvenile eventually went on tour together, and during one of the stops, their tour bus pulled into New York. This was 2002, and 50 Cent had the entire city buzzing. He was the most talked about artist in New York, and the streets were going wild over his rise. This moment right here set the stage for what came next, a life-changing connection waiting just around the corner. The tour bus driver just happened to know someone connected to 50 Cent's former manager, Shaw Money XL, and Buck kept pushing him, asking if he could help get 50 on the bus so they could maybe cook up something together. And somehow, it really happened. 50 actually stepped onto that tour bus, but he was there strictly to record with Juvenile, not with Buck. While Juvenile and 50 were in the back working on music, Buck made a sharp move. He started playing some of his own solo tracks for Lloyd Banks and Tony Yayo, who were also on the bus. One track in particular grabbed Lloyd Banks' attention instantly. Banks took that beat straight to the back where 50 was recording. 50 ended up jumping on that track, and it eventually became the song known as Hound on the legendary Get Rich or Die Tryin' album, title adjusted here to follow your guideline restrictions. Now, that wasn't actually the first track released with all 4 of them together. That honor goes to a little bit of everything on the 50 Cent is the Future mixtape, but Hound was the one that truly introduced Buck to the mainstream world and showed people what he could bring to the table. 50 liked Buck right away, but he couldn't offer him a deal just yet because 50 himself wasn't even signed to a major label at that time. Still, 50 didn't forget him. And just like Buck predicted, things eventually fell apart with UTP opening the door for a new opportunity. That's when fate stepped right in again. 50 reached out and wanted to fly Buck out to Los Angeles so he could meet with him, Eminem, and Dr. Dre, a move that would change Buck's entire career path forever.
A week after the deal fizzled out with UTP, 50 Cent ended up calling Young Buck and said, "Hey, we want that Bloodhound track. We'll pay you $20,000 for it. Let us put it on the album." And the track is getting mixed by Eminem and Dr. Dre.
Dre co-signed him, and Buck officially landed a spot in G Unit, a dream situation for any rapper trying to break through, especially someone who had already dealt with so many setbacks and stalled opportunities. Buck's first major placement under the G Unit umbrella was Hound on 50's Get Rich or Die Tryin' album. But 50 had a bigger plan for him. Instead of dropping Buck's solo project right away, 50 wanted to build his name properly, so he put Buck front and center on the group album Beg for Mercy. Beg for Mercy debuted at number 2 on the Billboard 200, moving 377,000 copies in its first week. Today, it's sold over 2.7 million copies in the US alone and is close to diamond status worldwide. With numbers like that, Young Buck wasn't just arriving, he was stepping onto the biggest stage possible, and the whole neighborhood felt it. Following G Unit's winning formula, Buck dropped a mixtape called Welcome to the Hood on May 31st, 2004, hosted by DJ Who Kid, which created heavy momentum leading into his solo run. Then on July 2nd, 2004, the first single Let Me In featuring 50 Cent dropped, hitting number 34 on the Billboard Hot 100 and setting the tone for what was coming next. Then came the huge moment. August 24th, 2004. Buck released his debut album Straight Outta Cashville, and the results were massive. The album debuted at number 3 on the Billboard 200, selling 361,000 copies its first week and going platinum soon after. His second single, Shorty Wanna Ride, became his highest charting solo record, climbing to number 17 on the Billboard Hot 100. But beyond the numbers, beyond the sales, Buck achieved something even bigger. He shattered what people call the Nashville curse. For decades, Nashville was boxed in as a country music-only city, with almost nobody outside that genre breaking through on a mainstream level. Buck changed that completely, becoming the first non-country artist from Nashville to make a major impact in hip-hop and gain real mainstream success. This was bigger than charts. It was history in the making. People in the city used to talk about a so-called Nashville curse, saying non-country artists could never break through. But Buck crushed that idea completely, opening the lane for everybody who came after him. But then, on November 15th, 2004, at the Vibe Awards, something chaotic went down that would follow Buck for years. Dr. Dre, Eminem, 50 Cent, the whole G Unit squad, and Suge Knight were all in the building that night. In the middle of the event, a man named Jimmy Johnson allegedly put his hands on Dr. Dre, and reports claim that Buck got involved in the chaos that followed. After the situation unfolded, Buck left the scene and later turned himself in a few days after. The case dragged on for almost a year and a half before everything was officially handled. Buck ended up receiving 3 years of probation and was ordered to complete 80 hours of community service. Even though the outcome wasn't severe, this became the first major red flag. The first sign that Buck's street instincts and deep loyalty to his people could put him at risk of losing everything he had worked so hard to build. Still, in 2005, Buck didn't slow down at all. He kept pushing his name, kept working, and kept proving his worth in the industry. He appeared on 3-6 Mafia's massive hit, Stay Fly, which peaked at number 13 on the Billboard Hot 100 and later went double platinum. Buck also released an independent album to help introduce upcoming G Unit South artists, a movement 50 had put him in charge of. Buck wasn't just an artist at this point, he was stepping into a leadership role, building his own lane inside the G Unit empire. By 2006, Buck was everywhere, dropping mixtapes left and right and heating up the streets while preparing for his next major album drop on February 6, 2006. He was moving like someone who knew the whole industry was watching, and he wasn't slowing down for anything. He dropped Case Dismissed, the introduction of G Unit South with DJ Drama, a project that doubled as a celebration of finally closing out his Vibe Awards case and a formal introduction to the artists he was building under the G Unit South banner. But while Buck was working on his second album, Buck the World, a major problem started bubbling between 50 Cent and their shared manager, Shaw Money XL. 50 called every G Unit member together and told them they all needed new management because he was cutting ties with Shaw Money. And this is where Buck's loyalty, one of his strongest qualities, suddenly turned into a real vulnerability. In 50's eyes, Buck had gotten too close to Shaw Money. They weren't just working together. Buck was even the best man at Shaw Money's wedding. So when 50 told everyone to let Shaw Money go, Lloyd Banks and Tony Yayo followed the order with no hesitation. But Buck didn't. Buck looked at Shaw Money like family, not just a business partner. He had no personal issues with Shaw Money, and he genuinely believed whatever problems existed between 50 and Shaw could eventually be fixed.
Shaw Money had became a best friend of mine. I'm the best man on this man's wedding. That's how me and close Shaw was. Me and Shaw were probably closer than me and 50. Him and 50 was, so I'm the best man of his man's wedding. I'm judging Shaw not from a business standpoint of his problems with 50, but looking at him as my brother.
In Buck's mind, there was no reason to turn his back on someone who had been solid with him from day one, but to 50, this felt like pure disloyalty, like Buck was picking a side that wasn't his. The shift in energy happened immediately. Suddenly, Banks, Yayo, and 50 were showing up together at shows, interviews, and major events, while Buck and Shaw Money were left promoting Buck's work on their own. And Buck believes this played a huge part in why Buck the World didn't match the success of his debut. The album sold 98,000 copies first week and eventually went gold, but without the full G-Unit machine behind him, it didn't get the powerful push it could have had. Buck the World officially dropped on March 27, 2007, but behind the scenes, the foundation was already starting to crack, and Buck could feel the shift coming. Buck the World debuted strong at number 3 on the Billboard 200 with 140,000 first week sales, but the singles, I Know You Want Me and Get Buck, didn't hit on the same level as the ones from his first album, and that became another point of tension. Around this time, 50 started accusing Buck of being too friendly with people he viewed as opponents. The Game, Jadakiss, Fat Joe, Jim Jones, and others. Buck later explained that he wasn't forming friendships with anybody. He was actually relaying information back to 50 about what folks were saying, trying to keep the team informed. But 50 took even that type of communication as a sign of disloyalty, like Buck was drifting away from the squad. Then another issue hit: money. 50 claimed Buck was spending recklessly, not keeping track of taxes, and that 50 had already stepped in twice to handle Buck's tax situation. By the time the third situation came around, 50 said he was done helping. By 2008, Buck found out he owed around $300,000 to the IRS, which turned into a major setback and a big pressure point. Things got even worse at the top of the year. In January, Buck showed up at a performance with Lil Wayne and Birdman, and both of them said publicly that Buck should leave G-Unit and join Young Money / Cash Money. And in the moment, Buck nodded along like he agreed. When 50 saw that footage, he was furious. In February 2008, G-Unit dropped a new mixtape called Return of the Body Snatchers Volume 1, and Buck wasn't featured on a single track, which shocked fans, especially since they had just released a song called Feel Good months earlier with all of them together. Then came the explosive turning point, the moment that flipped everything upside down and pushed Buck into a spiral that would take years to recover from. This was the moment Buck is still trying to recover from to this very day. The fall, the chaos, and the long climb back. In March 2008, 50 Cent and Young Buck had a private phone call that nobody knew about. What Buck didn't realize was that 50 was secretly recording the entire conversation. After that call, it actually looked like things were cooling down. Buck even showed up on tracks for the G-Unit mixtape Elephant in the Sand that same month, giving fans a little hope that the tension might finally settle. For a moment, it felt like the bond could be repaired, but that piece didn't last long at all. On March 20th, 2008, Yo Raps magazine released an interview where Young Buck said, "I'm still waiting on a royalty check, period. I've never seen a royalty check since I've signed with G-Unit, so hell yeah. I'll tell you one damn thing that show money. Is that good? I've never in my career cashed a royalty check." Here's the twist: that interview was old. It had been recorded months earlier, long before Buck and 50 started fixing things. But the publication decided to release it right when the two were rebuilding their relationship. The timing couldn't have been worse. It felt like straight sabotage. Shaw Money XL immediately tried to put out the fire the next day, denying the claims and saying Buck had cleared over $10 million working under 50's guidance. They were trying to calm the situation before it exploded again, but the damage was already done. On April 7th, 2008, on Monday morning, 50 Cent called into Hot 97 and made the announcement that shocked fans everywhere. He said Young Buck was officially no longer part of G-Unit as a group member, though he was still signed to G-Unit Records as a solo artist. That call changed everything and sent Buck into a tough chapter he never saw coming. The next week, when the whole G-Unit squad pulled up to Hot 97, 50 started revealing even more details and even claimed Buck was dealing with a serious personal habit issue. Buck stayed silent for a bit, probably trying to process everything that had just been thrown at him. But on May 12th, 2008, he dropped a track called My Interview, where he addressed being pushed out of G-Unit and the personal rumors 50 had mentioned. Things were calm for a moment, until June hit, and Buck made a move that locked in his fate. On June 15th, 2008, Young Buck hit the stage and publicly yelled out G-Unit, making it clear he was done with the crew. That was the point of no return, the moment that drew the line in the sand. Just 2 days later, on June 17, 2008, 50 released the full tape phone conversation. The one where Buck was emotional, asking for support, and trying to understand what went wrong. The entire world heard it, and the situation instantly exploded. The next day, June 18, 2008, Buck fired back with a diss track called The Taped Conversation, and even The Game jumped on the remix. A few days later, June 21st, there was talk about Buck and Game dropping a joint mixtape called Worth More Than 50 Cent set for July, but it never came out. Then came another major shift. When G-Unit dropped their second album, Terminate on Sight, on July 1st, 2008, Buck was only featured on 4 tracks, basically treated like a guest on what should have been his own crew's project. It was clear the bond had fully cracked. For the rest of 2008, Buck barely released any new music. According to him, 50 was blocking his ability to drop a new album, limiting his moves behind the scenes and putting major pressure on his career. This was one of the toughest stretches of Buck's entire journey, and the fallout was just getting started. Since Buck was still legally tied to G-Unit Records, 50 had the power to block any official albums he tried to drop, which forced Buck to pivot. Starting in 2009, he began flooding the streets with mixtapes instead, staying active, staying heard, and refusing to disappear. And here's the part real fans noticed instantly. 2009 was actually when Buck sounded the hungriest he had ever been. You could hear it in his voice. The pressure, the frustration, the urgency, the fire. It was raw emotion mixed with pure determination, like he was fighting to keep his career alive through the only outlet he had left, the music. Buck released multiple mixtapes in 2009, including Back for the Streets on April 11th and the highly praised Back on My Buck on May 26th. Tracks like I Want It All and I Got It, featuring Young Jeezy, showcased Buck sounding focused, sharp, and fully locked in, like he was ready to claw his way back to the top. But while Buck was trying to keep momentum going with mixtapes, his personal and legal problems were piling up fast, and they were hitting hard. On August 3rd, 2010, the IRS raided Buck's home over more than $300,000 in unpaid taxes. During the raid, authorities discovered a metal tool, and because Buck had a prior conviction from the 2004 Vibe Awards situation, they charged him over it, even though Buck insisted it belonged to his licensed tour manager. It was another heavy blow, right when he could barely afford more trouble. Just 3 days later, Buck did what he always did. He turned the chaos into music. He dropped a track called My Campaign, directly addressing the IRS raid and showing the world how he could take real-life pain and immediately flip it into powerful bars. His life was spinning out of control, but his music was hitting deeper than ever. Then on August 19th, 2010, Buck filed for Chapter 13 bankruptcy. But here's the major detail people often miss. That move, even though it came from a desperate situation, actually helped him break free from his G-Unit Records contract. It was a strategic play hidden inside a crisis, and it finally allowed him to move independently. He dropped his indie album, The Rehab, on September 7th, 2010. It debuted at number 55 on the Billboard 200 and sold a little over 6,400 copies in the first week. Solid numbers for a fully independent release, but far from the superstar heights he once had. Meanwhile, the legal problems just kept stacking up. In March 2011, G-Unit Records filed a $10 million lawsuit against him, adding even more pressure when he was already overwhelmed. Then, out of nowhere, a tiny spark of hope appeared. In late 2011, 50 Cent tweeted, "For some reason, I think Young Buck is mad at me. Who cares? I'm giving his $250,000 back, sucker." Fans didn't know what to make of it. Was it shade, a peace offering, or just 50 being 50? Then things took a dramatic turn. On March 4th, 2012, Buck survived a dangerous incident outside a South Nashville club where his girlfriend was injured in the shoulder. Buck wasn't physically harmed, but the situation shook the whole city. Then, on July 13th, 2012, Buck was officially sentenced to 18 months in federal custody related to the tool found during the IRS raid. It was another devastating hit during a time when everything seemed to already be collapsing around him. The next month, the IRS held a public auction and sold off Buck's personal belongings, jewelry, studio equipment, everything they could collect. They made around $53,000, but the whole event felt like a painful, humiliating reminder of how far things had fallen for someone who once stood at the top. Buck officially turned himself in during August 2012 to begin serving his 18-month sentence. But on October 2nd, 2013, when Young Buck walked out of prison, what happened next stunned the entire hip-hop world. No exaggeration. Behind the scenes, something major was already brewing and nobody saw it coming. 50 Cent had already repaired things with Tony Yayo and Lloyd Banks. And behind the scenes, he had been thinking about Buck too. Then, on June 1st, 2014, at Hot 97 Summer Jam, something legendary happened. 50 brought out all 3 original G-Unit members, and the entire stadium went wild. It was the official G-Unit reunion fans never thought they'd see again. They dropped 2 EPs, The Beauty of Independence on August 25th, 2014, and The Beast is G-Unit on March 3rd, 2015. Both projects had some serious heat, and fans truly believed the Brotherhood was back for real this time. Around the same period, Buck launched his ambitious 10 series of mixtapes, 10 Bullets, 10 Bricks, 10 Pints, 10 Bodies, and more, dropping multiple projects between 2015 and 2018. It showed how locked in he was with the music, grinding non-stop and proving he was still one of the hardest workers in the game. But then, more legal setbacks hit him again. On July 15, 2016, Buck was arrested after an altercation involving his ex-girlfriend, where authorities said he made serious threats about damaging her apartment. He was later sentenced to 7 months in custody, another setback in a long list of obstacles he had been fighting through. By 2018, though, things were finally looking bright again. Buck dropped Can't Lose on March 30th, 2018, a powerful motivational track that deserved way more recognition than it got. He even announced that his 3rd studio album would be executive produced by both 50 Cent and Dr. Dre, and fans couldn't believe it. The hype was massive. But once again, the situation between Buck and 50 started falling apart. 50 claimed Buck owed him over $300,000, and he reportedly sent cease and desist notices to block anything Buck tried to put out. The tension reignited instantly. Then in 2019, leaked private audio surfaced online of Buck speaking with a trans person. Instead of respecting the situation, 50 publicly mocked him on social media, posting insulting comments that were unfair and unnecessary. The internet ran with it, and the whole situation turned into a messy, uncomfortable moment. By 2020, it was clear the door to any future G-Unit reunion had closed completely. The relationship was broken beyond repair. And once again, Buck found himself trying to rebuild everything from scratch. Buck filed for bankruptcy once again, this time specifically to break free from his contract and push back against 50's lawsuit. After a long legal battle, Buck lost the case in 2023 and agreed to pay $200,690 of the alleged $250,000 debt. To cover that amount, plus other debts, he liquidated assets worth around $1.05 million, spending about $445,000 on legal fees and leaving close to $600,000 for creditors. The whole situation showed just how heavy things had become, but Buck kept fighting through it. Then in April 2025, Buck was arrested again and sentenced to 30 days in custody for repeated violations of his bond supervision tied to a pending domestic case from 2020. He was released around May 12, 2025. His trial has since been pushed back to January 12, 2026, giving him time to stabilize and reset his focus. And honestly, despite all the setbacks, Buck looks like he's in a much better space mentally and emotionally these days. He's active on social media, celebrating big moments like the 18th anniversary of Straight Outta Cashville, connecting with fans, and focusing on building a solid legacy instead of letting old drama define it. Buck's story has had ups, downs, twists, and shocks, but one thing's clear: he's still here and still pushing forward. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure you subscribe, like, share, and drop a comment. It helps the channel grow and lets me bring you more deep dives like this. Appreciate you for watching, and see you in the next video.